I never thought I'd be the kind of man to get played. You hear stories about guys who get blindsided by betrayal, and you think that'll never be me. I've seen too much. I'm too smart for that. But here I am, sitting on the edge of my couch, replaying the last few weeks of my life, and realizing just how wrong I was. The thing is, when it happens to you, when you're the one left holding the bag, you don't expect it. You don't see it coming. You think you've built a solid life, built it with your own two hands, and you trust the person beside you to do the same. But trust? That's a fragile thing. And let me tell you, it doesn't take much to shatter it. I'm Jack, and up until about 6 weeks ago, my life was good. Better than most. Retired, comfortable, with a small but tight-knit circle of friends. I had a nice house, a few good investments, and my wife, Linda, the woman I thought I'd spend the rest of my life with. Things were supposed to be winding down, but not in a bad way. I was ready for the easy life, fishing, working on my old truck, taking long walks through the woods. Linda? Well, she was everything I thought I wanted. Smart, beautiful. Yeah, I know that's cliché, but it's true. She'd always been the life of the party, the one who could talk to anyone and make them feel special. We had our share of problems over the years. What couple doesn't? But we always worked through them. At least, that's what I thought. I believed in us. I trusted her. That's the part that stings the most. Then, one day, it all started unraveling. It didn't hit me like a bomb or anything. No, it started small, barely noticeable. First, she started spending more time out of the house. She'd say she was going to the spa or running errands, but I didn't buy it. That wasn't Linda. She wasn't the type to spend hours getting massages or facials. Hell, she barely even had a skincare routine. So I let it slide. After all, maybe she was just getting some me time. She deserved it, right? I thought maybe I was just being paranoid. But it didn't stop there. Over the next couple of weeks, Linda changed. She started dressing differently. New clothes, more revealing, tighter than what she'd usually wear. Now, I'm no prude. I'm not one of those guys who gets possessive over what his wife wears. But this was different. It wasn't just the clothes. It was the way she acted. Her whole demeanor had shifted. She was more distant, more guarded. There were times when I'd walk in the door after a long day, and she'd just glance up at me, give me a half smile, and go back to whatever she was doing. No questions about my day, no how's work, no interest. It was like I wasn't even there. But the real kicker? One night, I came home early from a friend's house, planning to surprise her with a nice dinner I'd cooked. The house was dark, too dark. No lights on in the kitchen. I thought maybe she was out, so I started looking around. That's when I saw it. Her phone, face up on the counter. Now, Linda always kept her phone close. She'd never leave it lying around. So I did what any guy would do in my situation. I grabbed it. The first thing I saw? A message. Not just any message. A message from a guy named Jared. The message was short. Can't wait to see you tomorrow night. I'll pick you up at 7. My stomach dropped. For a second, I thought I was seeing things. But no, it was there, plain as day. I didn't need to see more. I slammed the phone back down on the counter and stormed out of the house, my mind racing. Jared? Who the hell was Jared? I didn't go back inside right away. I stood there in the driveway, fists clenched, staring at the dark windows. I couldn't breathe. It didn't make sense. Linda, my wife, the woman I'd been with for 16 years, was cheating on me. And I had proof now. I like to tell you I stayed calm, that I took a deep breath and thought things through. But I didn't. I was furious, red-hot angry. I marched back inside, grabbed my keys, and drove straight to the bar. I wasn't in the mood for a pity party, but I needed to think. And when I needed to think, I did it with a whiskey in my hand and my feet up on the bar stool. That night, I had a decision to make. I could confront Linda right then and there. I could make a scene, scream, demand answers. But I didn't. Not yet. I'd been burned before in business. And I wasn't about to make a rash move without knowing exactly what I was dealing with. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of seeing me lose my temper. No. I'd let her keep lying. Let her think I didn't know. The next day, I started making calls. I wasn't some naive fool who would just sit back and let it slide. I called a private investigator. He wasn't cheap, but I didn't care. I needed to know everything. Where she was going, who she was seeing, what she was doing when I wasn't around. I didn't want any more guesses. I wanted the truth. Over the next few days, the investigator got back to me with some disturbing news. Linda had been spending more time with Jared than I'd thought. Not just the occasional message or quick meetup. No, they'd been having dinner together, sneaking around, and meeting in places that made my blood boil. They were spending nights together at hotels, rooms booked under Linda's name. The worst part? The investigator had photos. Photos of Linda and this guy at a fancy restaurant, laughing together, touching. It wasn't just an affair. It was a full-blown relationship. I wanted to scream. I wanted to break something. I'd spent years building a life with this woman, trusting her, only to find out she'd been lying and sneaking around behind my back. But I didn't lose it. I wasn't that guy. Instead, I made a decision. I'd make sure she paid for what she'd done. I'd expose her. Not just to me, but to everyone. Family, friends, her colleagues, everyone. This wasn't just some little mistake. She'd shattered my trust. And if she thought she could get away with it, she was dead wrong. I've always been the kind of guy who prides himself on control. Not in a controlling way, but in the sense that I've always had a handle on the big things in life. I've managed businesses, handled tough situations, and kept a calm demeanor in chaos. But what I hadn't accounted for was how completely blindsided I'd be by a betrayal this deep. It wasn't just that Linda was seeing someone else. No, it was how carefully she had hidden it. The lies were subtle at first, but then they piled up like a mountain. And once I saw them, I couldn't unsee it. I couldn't unknow the truth. The private investigator had done his job, and the photos, the receipts, the hotel records, everything pointed to the same thing. Linda had been living a double life. And this Jared guy? He wasn't just some fling. He was the guy. The one she had been seeing for months. She'd even spent weekends away with him, visiting places she claimed were business trips. And all the while, she had kept up the act, pretending everything was fine at home. I'd had enough time to process it, to let the anger simmer and cool to something more manageable. But let me tell you, the moment I stood face to face with her, I could already feel that old, boiling rage rising again. I wasn't going to hold back this time. It was a Friday evening. Linda had just come home after another spa day. Her face lit up when she walked in, her voice all chipper as she asked about my day, like nothing had changed. I could feel my pulse picking up, but I kept my voice steady. I had to be in control of this conversation. Linda, sit down. We need to talk. She looked at me for a moment, then nodded and sat down at the kitchen table. She didn't seem to sense anything was wrong, yet I could tell there was a flicker of unease in her eyes. She knew something was off, but she didn't know how much I knew. Not yet. Everything all right? She asked, trying to sound casual, but I could hear the slight tremor in her voice. I think you know damn well it's not, I said, my tone cold, deliberate. She blinked, confusion washing over her face. What do you mean, Jack? I don't know what I expected. Maybe a quick denial. Maybe her trying to turn things around with a good excuse. What I didn't expect was for her to sit there and look at me like I was the one who'd gone mad. I took a deep breath, my mind a storm of thoughts, but I focused. I was going to let her explain herself, and then I was going to make sure she knew exactly how much I'd uncovered. Jared, Linda, I said, and her face went white. I know about him. I know about the trips, the hotel rooms, the receipts. You didn't think I'd find out, did you? She froze. It wasn't the look of someone caught off guard by an accusation. They always have some denial ready for that. No, this was different. She knew she'd been caught. Her eyes flickered to the side for a moment, and I could almost see the gears turning in her mind, looking for a way out, searching for something, anything to say to cover up the mess she'd made. Finally, she spoke, but her voice wavered. Jack, listen, it's not what you think, she began, her hands nervously fidgeting in her lap. I wasn't having it. Don't tell me it's not what I think. You think I'm stupid, don't you? She opened her mouth to speak, but I raised a hand to stop her. No, no more lies, Linda. I know everything. I know you've been sleeping with him. I know you've been sneaking around for months. And now I want to hear you admit it. Her face flushed. She looked almost pitiful for a moment, but the guilt didn't change the situation. It didn't make her betrayal go away. Jack, I'm sorry, she said, her voice small. I never meant for this to happen. Jared, he was just someone I met. It wasn't supposed to go this far. I could feel the anger rising again, but I didn't let it control me. I needed her to talk, to dig herself deeper. Just someone you met? I scoffed. How many someones are there, Linda? How many times do I have to catch you in a lie before you realize I'm not stupid? Her face twisted. I could see her searching for the right words, but there were none. The truth was ugly, and she couldn't mask it anymore. I didn't know what I was doing, she said, her voice weak now. It was just one night. It wasn't anything serious, Jack. I swear. I didn't mean to hurt you. I leaned forward, eyes locked on hers. How long, Linda? How long have you been doing this? She hesitated. I could see the mental math happening in her head. Should she lie? Should she try to minimize it? But at this point, I'd already seen enough. She wasn't getting out of it. A few months, she admitted in a whisper, her shoulders slumping in defeat. It started with a few messages, and I didn't think it would turn into anything more. But it did. I nodded slowly, taking in the full weight of her words. Months. Months of deceit, of pretending everything was fine while she was out with Jared, making new memories, sharing herself with him while I sat at home, oblivious. And you didn't think I'd find out? I asked, voice low, dangerous. She shook her head, guilt and shame painted across her face. I didn't know what to do, Jack. I was scared. I didn't want to lose you, but that wasn't it. I wasn't the one she was worried about losing. It was Jared. I stood up from the table, hands resting on the back of the chair. You don't get to play the victim here. You've been lying to me for months, sneaking around behind my back, and now you want to act like this is all some kind of accident. Her eyes filled with tears, but I wasn't buying it anymore. The tears were for herself, not for me. She wasn't sorry for what she'd done to me. She was sorry she'd been caught. I know what I've done is unforgivable, she said, barely above a whisper. But Jack, please, I need you. I don't want to lose you. I'll do anything to fix this. I let out a bitter laugh. Fix it? How do you fix something like this? What exactly do you think you could do to undo the last few months? Tell me, because I'm all ears. She looked up at me, eyes desperate now. Jack, I'm sorry. I'll end things with him. I swear. Just give me a chance. I didn't say anything for a long time. I just stood there, looking at her, thinking about the life we'd built. The years we'd spent together. I'd always thought I could trust her. That was the hardest part, the part that felt like a sucker punch to the gut. But I didn't want to hear any more apologies. She'd already shown me who she really was. Now it was my turn to show her who I could be. Linda, I said, voice steady, you've already made your choice. And now I'm going to make mine. The silence after Linda's desperate plea felt like it lasted an eternity. There was nothing left to say in that moment. She had laid out her admission, hoping for forgiveness, and I had made it clear that there would be no easy path back. What she had done wasn't something you could just sweep under the rug. The weight of her betrayal hung between us like a suffocating cloud. I didn't speak for a long time after that. I just stared at her, watching the desperation in her eyes, waiting for the tears to stop. But I wasn't moved by them. She was good at playing the victim, at twisting things to make it seem like she had no control over her actions. But that wasn't the reality. The reality was that she'd been playing a game I hadn't even known I was a part of. I finally broke the silence, and my voice was colder than I ever thought I could sound. You think you can just walk back into my life, and everything will be fine? That we can just forget the last few months? Pretend like nothing happened? She started to speak, but I cut her off. I wasn't interested in more lies, more excuses. I needed her to understand just how deep she had dug this hole. No, Linda, you've already made your choices. You made them with Jared. While I was at home, busting my ass, you were out there, living a life behind my back, making memories with him. And now, you want me to just turn the page? Like I haven't seen it all? Linda's face turned a shade of red I hadn't seen in years. She wasn't used to me speaking to her like this. I could tell it stung, and part of me wanted to savor the moment. But I couldn't. That would be letting her off too easy. I want a divorce, I said, my voice firm. There's nothing more to talk about. You don't get to keep your life with me after what you've done. Her eyes widened, and I could see the panic start to set in. She was trying to gather herself, trying to figure out how to fix it, how to make it all go away. But this wasn't something that could be fixed. Not now. Jack, please. Don't do this. We've been through so much together. She choked on her words, not knowing where to go next. I'll end it with Jared. I swear. Just don't leave me. I didn't flinch. You think it's that easy? Just because you say you'll end it, everything goes back to normal? You've been lying to me for months, Linda. I can't just forget that. She stood up then, moving toward me, reaching out like she was trying to grab hold of something to save her. Jack, please don't walk away from me. Please. I stood my ground. I'm not walking away from you, Linda. You've already walked away from me. You did that when you started this affair. When you lied, when you cheated. Don't you dare try to make me feel guilty for holding you accountable for your actions. She fell silent again, her hands shaking at her sides. The air between us felt thick, and I could see the truth settling in for her. There was no going back from this. But I wasn't just going to let it end with a divorce. Not like that. I had worked too hard for everything in my life to let her walk away unscathed, thinking she could get away with betraying me. No, I was going to make sure she felt the full weight of her choices. The next few days were a blur. My mind was focused, calculating. This wasn't just about making Linda suffer emotionally, though that would come in time. This was about making sure she knew exactly what it felt like to destroy everything that she had taken for granted. And I was going to do it with precision. I contacted the private investigator again, told him I needed more than just the photos. I needed something that would expose Linda for what she really was, someone who thought she could destroy our marriage, destroy everything we built, without any consequences. I spent hours going over the details with him. The hotels where Linda and Jared had stayed, the restaurants they had visited, the places they had been. I wanted everything. Receipts, names, addresses, everything that could tie them together. The PI assured me that he could get more. He could gather the proof that would destroy her. But I wasn't done yet. I had something else planned, something that would make sure Linda felt the full force of her actions, not just within the walls of our home, but in every aspect of her life. I knew exactly how to make her pay. First, I contacted some of her closest friends. I needed to make sure that the truth wasn't buried or swept under the rug by people who didn't want to get involved. I sent them photos. I sent them the evidence I had gathered, messages, receipts, and even some of the hotel records. Linda had always been so proud of her circle, so I made sure they knew exactly what kind of woman she was. I didn't need to make it a public spectacle yet, but I needed the people closest to her to see the truth. Then came the real work. I contacted a few people at her job, people I knew were involved in higher-level decisions. I made sure they knew about Linda's affair, about her taking time off for business trips that were really just excuses for rendezvous with Jared. I wasn't going to let her keep that job if she was going to betray me and lie about it. Her career? That wasn't safe anymore. Linda had always prided herself on her professional reputation. She always talked about how hard she worked to climb the ladder. Well, now I was going to make sure she had to work twice as hard to clean up the mess I was leaving behind. I didn't care about the consequences. She needed to feel the gravity of what she had done. By the time I was done, Linda had no idea what was coming. She thought I was just going to quietly walk away, sign the papers, and let her move on with her life. She didn't realize that I was going to tear her world apart, piece by piece. The day of the confrontation came fast. I had everything lined up, the evidence, the plans for exposing her to her friends, her colleagues, and anyone else who needed to know. I called her into the living room. Her face was pale, almost like she knew something was off. She didn't sit down right away, and I could see her trying to read my expression. I wasn't hiding anything. This was it. "Jack, what now?" she asked, her voice shaky, desperate for any reassurance. I didn't respond immediately. I just walked over to the coffee table and picked up a stack of papers. Linda watched me, her eyes flicking from the papers to my face. I didn't say a word as I handed her the photos. The first photo was of her and Jared, laughing at a fancy restaurant. The next was from a hotel, their faces close, intimate. And the last one was a picture from one of those business trips she'd taken, both of them walking out of a hotel room, clearly not just friends. She gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. "Where did you get these?" she whispered, her voice trembling now. "Doesn't matter, Linda," I said. "What matters is that everyone will know what you did. You think you can sneak around and lie your way through life? Not anymore." She started to cry, but there was no sympathy left in me. She didn't deserve it. "Jack, please, please don't do this. I'll lose everything." "Good," I said, the word hanging in the air like a bitter promise. "You'll lose it all, Linda. Your job, your friends, your reputation. Because you thought you could betray me and get away with it. Well, you're wrong. She tried to stand, tried to fight back, but there was nothing left to say. Her fate had already been sealed. I wasn't just walking away from her. I was making sure that everyone around her knew exactly what she was. And as I watched her crumble, I couldn't help but feel a strange sense of calm. The revenge wasn't about making her suffer. It was about justice. And for the first time in months, I felt like I had it all under control again. The days after Linda's initial exposure were a whirlwind, but not for the reasons she expected. She thought I would fold. She thought I would give in, maybe feel pity for her as she played the remorseful wife. But that wasn't going to happen. Not after everything she'd done. It wasn't just about the affair. It was about the deceit, the lies, and the disrespect. I wasn't going to allow her to walk away from this unscathed. What I did in those days after the confrontation was calculated, precise. It was about breaking her down in ways she didn't see coming. I'd already cut the ties between us emotionally. Now, it was time to deal with the rest of her life. I wasn't going to leave her life untouched like she had left mine. The first step in my revenge plan was to expose her to her closest friends. Linda had always been someone who prided herself on her social circle. She had this tight-knit group of women who admired her, people she considered her closest confidants. They had no idea what she'd been doing behind closed doors. But they were about to. I wasn't one to get petty with things like this. I was methodical. I didn't want to just send out some angry, bitter message to her friends. That would be too easy. I wanted them to see who Linda really was. The woman who pretended to have it all together, while secretly betraying her husband with her friend Jared. So, I sent the photos. I sent the text messages. I even included some of the receipts, things like hotel bookings, dinners, and the evidence of those secret getaways. It wasn't just the affair that I wanted them to see. It was the lies. The countless lies Linda had spun to cover it up. I didn't just send it to one or two friends. I sent it to the whole group. I made sure they saw what kind of woman she was. They needed to know. And the look on Linda's face when I mentioned that I had shared some things with your friends was priceless. She had no idea how to react. It was the first real taste of her own medicine. Her first response was to try and sweep it under the rug. She called me, begging me to take the photos down, to take everything back. But I was unmoved. I told her that what was done was done. The truth had already been set in motion, and there was no going back. I could hear her voice crack on the other end. She was trying to keep her composure, but I could tell she was already facing the consequences. Linda wasn't someone who dealt with shame well, and I knew this would be the start of her unraveling. Exposing Linda's social circle wasn't enough. She needed to pay for the betrayal at work too. After all, this affair had been going on for months. Months during which she had used work trips as an excuse to meet up with Jared. I wasn't about to let her get away with using her job as a cover for this. I didn't know everyone in her office, but I knew a few key people who held some influence who would listen when I made my case. So I did. I reached out to her boss, a man who had always been courteous to me, but who had no idea about Linda's extracurricular activities. I explained the situation in no uncertain terms. I wasn't angry in my approach. I was calculated. I laid out the timeline. The work trips, the meetings, the dinners. All of it. I made sure to drop a few hints about how Linda's personal life was affecting her professional behavior. It wasn't just the affair. It was the fact that she was distracted, disinterested in her job, and neglecting her responsibilities. I didn't go overboard, but I made it clear that her behavior would not go unnoticed. It wasn't a threat, just a reminder that actions have consequences. When I got off the phone, I knew her position at work was precarious at best. And by the time I followed up with a couple of her colleagues, I could already sense the shift in how they looked at her. It wouldn't be long before her reputation at the office crumbled, just like her social life. The next step was the one that would hurt her the most. Linda had always been the one to handle our finances. She liked to think she was the responsible one in the relationship, the one who made the big financial decisions. I had always trusted her to keep things running smoothly, and I wasn't the type to pay attention to every little detail. That was a mistake on my part, but it wasn't going to be one for long. I took a good look at our bank accounts. I examined our joint investments, the savings we had set aside for retirement, the home we owned together. Linda had been in charge of all of it, and she had made a few questionable financial decisions decisions that I knew could cause her problems now. I immediately began making some moves. I froze certain accounts. I moved some money around, enough to put her in a position where she couldn't access everything without my permission. I wanted to make sure that, when this divorce was finalized, she wouldn't have as much control over our assets as she had before. I wasn't looking to bankrupt her. I wasn't vindictive in that way, but I was going to make her feel the consequences. And when she came to me asking why I had moved money around, I gave her a simple answer. Divorce means division, Linda. I'm protecting myself. Her face was pale when she asked if I was serious. I nodded. I'm serious. And that was that. She was powerless to change the course of events now. No matter how much she begged, no matter how much she cried, the financial aspects of our separation were in motion. She would have to face that reality sooner or later. One of the hardest parts of this whole situation was how Linda tried to manipulate the kids. She thought if she played the good mother card, it would smooth things over. She thought she could pull the kids into her corner, make them feel sorry for her, and turn them against me. But I wasn't going to let that happen. I sat down with them. I didn't want to badmouth their mother. After all, they were still their mother. But I wasn't going to let her poison their minds. I told them the truth, as simply and calmly as I could. They were old enough to understand, and I could see the hurt in their eyes as I explained that Linda had made some very bad choices. It wasn't easy, but I had to make sure they knew that I wasn't the one who broke the family. Linda had made that decision. She'd broken it. And no matter what, I was still their father. I wasn't going anywhere. Now for the final piece of my plan. Linda had tried to cover her tracks, tried to make it all disappear in the privacy of our home. But I wasn't going to let that happen. I wasn't going to let her think she could just bury the truth and move on. The day I filed for divorce, I made sure the news spread. I didn't want the details leaked, but I made sure people knew why we were getting divorced. Linda's affair with Jared was the reason. I made sure that information got out, not just in whispers, but in clear, undeniable terms. I sent out a carefully worded email to a few mutual friends. I didn't need a full public spectacle, but I wasn't going to let her get away without a reckoning. I watched Linda's world crumble before my eyes. The calls from her friends asking for details. The whispers at her office. The cold stares at social gatherings. She had no idea just how much I had planned, how much I had orchestrated to make her feel the weight of her betrayal. And through it all, I felt no satisfaction, at least not in the way she might have expected. This wasn't about revenge for revenge's sake. It was about holding her accountable for her choices. It was about making sure she never forgot what it felt like to break a family apart. And in the end, when the dust settled, there was no victory to claim. Only the knowledge that I had done what was necessary. I had reclaimed my life, and nothing was ever going to take that from me. The days after the divorce papers were filed felt almost surreal. It was as if Linda's world had collapsed around her, and yet she couldn't grasp the magnitude of what had just happened. I think part of her believed deep down that I was bluffing. After all, I'd always been the calm one, the one who avoided conflict. I was the steady hand in our marriage, while she had always been the impulsive one, acting without thinking, making decisions on a whim. But now the tables had turned. Now, the consequences of her actions were finally catching up to her. But Linda wasn't the type to just roll over and accept defeat. No, she had too much pride for that. And knowing the kind of person she was, I was prepared for the inevitable. She was going to fight back. She wasn't going to go quietly. It started with a phone call. A few days after I'd filed for divorce, Linda reached out to me. It wasn't unusual for her to call, but this time, there was something different in her tone. It wasn't the usual defensive attitude, the I'm right, you're wrong thing she always did. No, this time she was softer, almost pleading. I know I messed up, she said, her voice shaky. I know I've hurt you, and I don't know what I was thinking. But we can fix this. We can make it work again. Please, just give me a chance. I could hear the desperation in her voice. But what caught my attention was how quickly she flipped the script. She wasn't just asking for my forgiveness. No, that would have been too simple. She was trying to paint herself as the victim, trying to make me feel guilty for wanting to leave her after everything that had happened. I've changed, I swear, she continued. I've been going to therapy and I'm working on myself. You don't know how much I've realized, how much I regret everything. Please, don't take the kids away from me. I can't lose them too. She had the nerve to drag the kids into this. It wasn't about her feeling sorry for what she'd done. It was about her trying to keep her life from falling apart completely. She was trying to keep control, and she was using me, using the kids, to do it. It made me sick. I didn't say anything for a long moment. I wasn't sure how to respond, because part of me wanted to hear her grovel, to hear her beg for forgiveness. But I wasn't that petty. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of knowing she still had some hold on me. "I've heard this before, Linda," I finally said, my voice steady. "You've said these things before, and you've broken my trust every single time. I can't do this anymore. It's over." There was silence on the other end. I could almost feel her recoiling, processing my words. Then the quiet sobbing started. "Please don't do this," she begged. "Please don't take everything from me. I need you." But I wasn't moved. "Not anymore." "I'm sorry," I said, "but you've already taken everything from me. I'm just reclaiming what's left of myself." I hung up before she could respond. Linda had never been one to shy away from using her social media platforms to project a perfect image of our life. She posted about everything: our vacations, the dinners we had, the family outings. People love her posts. They saw us as this perfect couple, the ones everyone else envied. But the facade was about to come crashing down. A few days after our phone call, Linda made a post on Facebook. She was smiling in the picture, sitting in a park, with a caption that read, "Grateful for the lessons learned. Here's to new beginnings." I knew what that was. It was her attempt to reframe the narrative, to make it look like she was the one who was better off now. She was trying to make herself look like the strong, independent woman who had found her way after the storm of our divorce. It was an act of deflection, an attempt to control the perception of her life. But I wasn't about to let her get away with it. I spent hours gathering the evidence. I found old screenshots of her conversations with Jared, those late-night chats, the ones where she would talk about how excited she was for their next meetup. I dug through old photos and messages I had saved from when we were together. I had a few that would make even her most loyal followers question everything. Then, I took a screenshot of Linda's Facebook post and added a caption of my own. "Here's to new beginnings, like line to everyone who cares about you. Hashtag truth hurts, hashtag not so grateful, hashtag you mean more than just an apology." I posted it, tagging her. I didn't care anymore. She'd already put the facade out there, so I had every right to put the truth on blast. The response was immediate. Linda's friends were torn. Some came to her defense, but others began to question her actions. The people who had once seen her as a strong, empowered woman were now starting to see the cracks. But what really hit Linda hard was her family. Her parents, who had always stood by her, suddenly began calling her out for the first time. Her mother, who had been one of her biggest cheerleaders, sent her a text message that read, "Linda, you're better than this. What happened to you?" It was the first sign that the walls were starting to close in on her. As if things weren't bad enough, Linda came to me in person a few days after the social media debacle. She showed up at the house unannounced, carrying a bag from a store I knew all too well. "I know you've been hurt, and I can't change the past," she started, her eyes wide with a mix of hope and desperation. "But I can show you that I've changed. I've been working on myself. I've been going to therapy, and I'm trying to become a better person. I've learned so much, and I just need you to see that I'm not the same woman who hurt you." I couldn't help but laugh, a dry, humorless laugh that made her face flush with frustration. "You think buying me a gift is going to change anything?" I said, walking over to the bag she was holding. I opened it. It was a watch. A nice one. A symbol of how much she thought money and material things could fix the mess she'd made. "This isn't about a watch, Linda," I said, throwing it back onto the counter. "You can't buy your way out of this. No amount of therapy or gifts is going to undo what you did. You were careless with my heart, my trust, and now you're trying to act like none of it matters. You're not fooling me." Linda's eyes filled with tears. "I know I messed up," she said, her voice cracking. "I'll do anything to fix it." But I was done. I was done listening to her excuses, done hearing her promises. "You can't fix this," I said. "I'm done trying to fix you. You were given more than enough chances, and you blew it. Now it's my turn." And with that, I walked out of the room. That evening, I did one last thing. I filed the paperwork to transfer full custody of the kids to me. Linda could see them, of course, but it would be on my terms now. She would have to prove she was capable of being a responsible parent, and I wasn't going to make it easy for her. The next morning, she called me, furious, demanding to know what I was doing. I'm doing what's best for them, I told her. I'm making sure they don't grow up thinking it's okay to lie and cheat, and I'm making sure they know what it means to respect others. That includes respecting me as their father. There was silence for a long moment, and then I heard her voice, weak and defeated. I never wanted it to be like this. Well, you should have thought of that before, I said, hanging up the phone. And just like that, I had taken back control of my life. The divorce was final. Linda was no longer part of my world, not in the way she once was. As the days passed, the weight I had been carrying for so long lifted. I didn't feel happy, exactly. I didn't want to gloat over Linda's misery. But I did feel free. I had reclaimed my life, and the scars she had left on me were slowly healing. It wasn't just about revenge. It was about showing her, and myself, that I was worth more than the lies and betrayal she'd put me through. She had thought she could walk all over me, but in the end, I was the one who walked away with the last word. If there's one thing I've learned from this experience, it's that you should never let anyone, especially someone you love, make you feel small. People like Linda may think they can play you, but the truth always comes out in the end. And when it does, you have to be ready to stand tall, even if it means standing alone. In the end, I'm better off without her, and she knows it.